Hey YouTube, what's going on? We're going to do something a little different today. Today I'm going to go over some stuff in my collection. In particular, this is going to be a segment completely devoted, one of many in the future that is going to be completely devoted to my ring collection. So having said that, let's hit the intro and let's get to it.
Behold, my stuff.
All right, so this particular bit, I wanted to show off my Lord of the Rings ring collection. It's not complete, but I'm still missing a couple different rings, but I want to go over two rings that we are familiar with, both if you read the books and have watched the films and are familiar with perhaps maybe the radio show or things like that. So you will have seen it across multimedia, but maybe you know the least about these because they weren't discussed really at all. So, and a lot of the video games didn't touch on this. If you know Shadows of Mordor, you know who the character Celebrimbor is, you know that. But we're going to do a little bit of history about it. So something like, for example, the very beautiful forged ring of Barahir, which we see adorn the ring of Aragorn. We're not going to go into that, how it was created, how it came to, how it passed from elves to men. That could be done a different day. We're not really going to talk about the One Ring, you know, and Sauron's thing there. I think those have been done to death, and there's really no reason to make another video about that. But something, and, you know, the one that's most common is, you know, if you discuss the Rings of Power, everybody talks about Narya. And everybody likes Narya because it's the one that is most featured and named in the film, and it's Galadriel's ring. And that's great. You know, but again, because it was given to her and it stayed with her, it passed from Celebrimbor to Galadriel, and she never gave it to anybody else. I don't really feel that there's a lot of story to that ring, and therefore it's not really one that's interesting that I want to talk about. The one that I find is more interesting are the rings that pass from people to people. So the next one you may want to talk about is you go to Narya's sister or brother ring, Narya. I don't really know if the rings have genders. These look like generic rings. Hers looks like a girl's ring, and that bugs me about the design. But Narya is the ring of fire, the flame-powered ring, and it was in the possession of Gandalf in Return of the King, but it was one of the three elven rings forged by Celebrimbor, like circa like 15-something or other. 15... and then distributed out among the original elf recipients in early 16-something or other. And so we know that Gandalf came into possession of that. And what's really cool about Narya, it looks very different than Narya. Of course, having the ruby or the red crystal center symbolizing that flame power. What's really interesting about that ring is that it was given to Gandalf the Grey, it was not given to Saruman the White, and it is believed that that is what planted the seed of envy in Saruman, which caused him eventually to go apeshit and turn into Saruman the Many-Colored, and basically Saruman the Douche. So I really do like the history of Narya, and I probably want to do a separate video just on Narya. But today I want to talk about two other rings, because I could go over Narya in great detail when I break down maybe my whole Gandalf cosplay that I do, because I do have a full Gandalf costume that I like. And that particular Narya graces my costume. So I want to talk about something different in terms of elven rings, and that is the ring of Vilya. Vilya is the ring of Gil-galad, and it is the ring of Elrond as we see it, and it has been advertised as a toy as the ring of Elrond. It is the air-powered ring, and Gil-galad is badass. This is called the mightiest of the three elven rings, believe it or not, and so it passed to what they believed at the time was the mightiest high elf king, which was Gil-galad, whereas Galadriel may have been the most magical or powerful witch in that sense. Gil-galad was mighty, and so he got the strongest of the rings. And of course, he was killed in the prologue. We do witness him die in the Lord of the Rings film with Peter Jackson, and this is Peter Jackson's design. And that ring then passed to Elrond Half-Elven, and so Elrond became the custodian of this ring up until the end of the time of the Three Rings, and they passed to the Greyhavens, where its power diminished and went into the west, just like Galadriel and Narya. So this particular design, even though it's the Ring of Air, they tried to give it a wispy aspect to it, a less chaotic look, but it very much resembles Narya. So if we compare it next to Narya, you can see Narya and Vilya do have a very similar look to them. They definitely marry as a family of rings, whereas Narya does not. And the thing that bothers me about that design is I think it just got vetoed and they just went, it doesn't look like a girl's ring. And I would have liked to have seen the original concept for Narya when they were going to do the water ring with the air ring and the fire ring. It also kind of interested me that there was no earth ring. And I think the reason there was no earth ring, and bear with me, is for the following reason. I think the reason was, as I said, Celebrimbor did craft another ring without the influence of Sauron, or Anatar at the time, when he was deceiving the elves. And I think the reason there's no earth ring is because this is the earth ring. And this is the ring of Thror, which is, I refer to as the ring of Durin. The reason is because they had to call it something way back when they gave it to Durin. So it wasn't going to be called the Ring of Thror all that time before Thror was even born. So the Ring of Durin, as I call it, is the only dwarf ring of the 7 not touched by Sauron's influence. It was not touched by Anatar. He didn't have a say in it. But he did have an influence over the subsequent 6 that were created. And as a result of that, he was able to get his hands on those rings sooner than he was able to get this one. This was the final ring to come into his possession. So it was the first dwarf ring and the last ring to be obtained by Sauron. Now, the dwarf ring of Durin appears as a silver ring in Lord of the Rings prologue, and is the only time we see those rings. We see a scene where the dwarves are looking at them and they take them from the table, and that's literally it. But thanks to 4K, we're able to see that it is the design that we do see in The Hobbit, but it's a new mold in The Hobbit. The stone is reduced, and the base plate that the stone sits on was enhanced. And the color is now shifted to gold, as I said. So we can say that the detail on the Ring of Durin is identical to the detail in Lord of the Rings. So my ring collection is really based on Lord of the Rings, not The Hobbit, but it does have Hobbit influences, with this one being gold. The stone is not described the way Vilya is, which is actually described having a sapphire in its core, but this does have a blue stone, but it has a violet hue to it, and it's unclear what the stone is. One thing that I really thought was interesting about the Dwarven rings is when Sauron takes possession of 3 rings, including the Ring of Durin, 2 others, the other 4 were destroyed by dragons, or consumed by dragons, whatever you want to say. They melted them down. They took the rings, and they're hoard, and they're gone, and it's fine. Dain Ironfoot, or Dane Ironfoot, or Red Axe, is offered a ring of power, a dwarven ring of power, at the time of Lord of the Rings. And a messenger goes post-Hobbit, pre-Final Battle Lord of the Rings, to Erebor, and offers a ring of power, possibly even the mouth of Sauron himself, to Dain if he can give him information about Bilbo, or hobbits in general, as it is believed that Bilbo has the One Ring, the One Ring, or the One Ring. And so I always wondered, was it the Ring of Durin that was offered? Because the Ring of Durin not being crafted by Sauron, even his possession, perhaps is easier to resist than the other 2 that he had, which were influenced by him. So I always wondered about that, and I thought that was kind of interesting. And in particular, a couple of interesting facts about the Ring of Durin. Much like maybe you didn't know that Elrond's ring was originally possessed by Gil-galad, even though the prologue shows us Gil-galad taking the ring right before he dies in that series. The Ring of Durin was not given to Durin I. It was given to Durin III, which is something a lot of people don't know, because Durin I was way before the forging of the rings. And it didn't happen in Erebor. Erebor was not really a thing at that time. It is Durin III resided in Khazad-dûm at the time, in Moria's scape. And then it passed to Thror down the line. And Thror had that in his possession while ruling Erebor in the last of the 7 Dwarven kingdoms, the Kingdom of Durin they called it, but it was really because that was Durin's heirs. And then it passed to his son Thrain II, and he was the last dwarf to take possession of that ring before Sauron got it. In the book, it is Thror and Thrain go together, encounter Azog, and that's when Azog cuts his head off. They don't go to war. They're literally just like, hey, I got something to say. And they cut his head off and like, oh, he killed my dad. So he takes the ring, he takes all that, he goes back, gets some people together, and that's when they go and have the battle. That's when Thrain disappears, and we find out that the necromancer has taken Thrain and therefore the ring. And we find out that Sauron is beginning to collect the rings now. We also find out he got 2 more in the process. Like, okay, so he's been going for them. So very cool to find out that it was actually Durin III who was presented the ring, and that it was given to him in Khazad-dûm, not Erebor. Another interesting thing that makes me wonder about Erebor is that, and Moria itself, we hear the line, the dwarves dug too deep and too greedily. And that led to the uncovering of the Balrog, which was a major friggin' problem. And of course, the Balrog is called the Balrog of Morgoth, and Morgoth is the big bad in Lord of the Rings. It's Sauron's boss. It's Sauron's god. He's a level of entity above Sauron. So, one of the powers of the Ring of Durin is that it multiplies one's horde. So it gives one... it enhances what's called their natural skills over dominion, but it means that it amplifies your ability to sit upon and rule over, so to speak. You know, this is mine and respect, it's mine. So hoarding, if you will. And it multiplies that which you mine and which you hoard. So it makes you bountiful and plentiful in your endeavors as a miner, which of course the dwarves are. So it makes me wonder, is that why so much mithril was gutted out of Moria to the point of brink? And is that what led to Thror's horde being so gutted and everything like that? And it also makes me wonder, is this really the cause of the dragon sickness? Is it the greed of the ring poisoning over the treasure as opposed to the treasure itself? It kind of makes you wonder about that. So the one dwarf ring there, the first dwarf ring, has a really interesting history to it. And I've always kind of wondered about stuff like that. So I very much thought that learning a little bit about Vilya, the Ring of Gil-galad, or the Ring of Elrond, and of course the Ring of Thror, also called the Ring of Durin, were definitely the 2 rings to talk about in the ring collection. I've said it before, but I could do a whole video just on the story of the Ring of Barahir and how that came to Aragorn's line from, you know, the First Age all the way on. You read about that ring in the Silmarillion. So I don't want to go over the One Ring, and I don't really want to go over the ones that we know. I would like to collect the Ring of Men at some point. I don't have that one. I really wanted one that's a size 12, and I just can't find one at that size. I've seen size 11 I would take if I can get my hands on it, but that's even hard to get. But size 10 and under for the Ring of Men, just, I'd prefer one that can fit on my second finger. So I'm trying to find a size 12. But with the Lord of the Rings rings, these are all from an Italian sculptor, an officially licensed replica based on Peter Jackson and Weta's designs for those rings. And they are not hard to come by. They are, they're not expensive either, but they're collectibles. They're not really jewelry. You're not going to wear them around without turning your finger green or whatever, wearing the finish. So they're meant to be displays. But I very much enjoy those particular rings. I think they display well. I do like them a lot. If you were to go to Amazon and look for these rings, the Ring of Thror is what they actually call this ring, even though I've seen it listed as the Ring of Thrain and the Ring of Durin. The Ring of Elrond is often what this is called, even though it should be called Vilya. This is actually referred to as the Ring of Gandalf, even though it should be called Narya. And Nenya is always called Nenya, although it has been also sublined as the Ring of Galadriel. And Nenya is the least, in my opinion, it's the most intricate of the designs, and it's my least favorite design. I think there's power in simplicity. The Ring of Barahir is not hard to find. It's the most done of all the rings in Lord of the Rings, because it was the main character's ring, and Aragorn, well, you could say Frodo was the main character, but Aragorn was the Han Solo of that movie, and I think everybody wanted that ring. And then, of course, there's the One Ring, and there's a million of these. And so you get the one you want. I particularly like having it displayed this way, which is I had Ultra Effects Studios resin print me a very large ring on a custom finger of Sauron that I made myself, and I like to display it that way. So that is an introduction to my ring collection. We talked about 2 of the lesser known, but I think more important rings of power in Lord of the Rings. And in the future, I'd like to go over other rings that have really cool histories and things like that. Something maybe like in the comic book world, the Ring of the Flash, Silver Age Flash, the Ring of Green Lantern has seen many iterations and many versions, many powers, many wearers. Something from films like The Phantom, very historic there. The rings of like the Agents of the Shadow, Dracula's ring, the ring of Duke Leto Atreides, Aquaman's rings, Star Wars rings. There's tons of rings in Star Wars. Most recently in Solo, I've done a video on this particular guy, the Ring of the Red Dawn, the signet that Dryden Voss wore. Something more recent that I've acquired, the ring of Lucifer Morningstar, if you watch that series, which you should. So I have a lot of rings, and I'd like to do more informational videos about rings. And so if you keep an eye out, you might see a few more of those. But thank you for checking it out. And do not fear rings of power. I encourage you to collect them if you're not already collecting them. They make for a really nice display in your home. And, you know, Lord of the Rings is just one of those rich cultural fantasy worlds that just have such cool stuff. And I love fantasy jewelry, but if you're going to start a ring collection, you can't go wrong with starting with Lord of the Rings rings. Thanks, you guys, for checking out these 2 rings. In the future, like I said, we'll visit some other rings. If you happen to have a ring that you've always wanted to learn about or hear someone talk about, you could comment below and tell me what some of your favorite movie or television or comic or video game rings are. And maybe we'll do a video on it. But I think the next round, we may veer away from Lord of the Rings and go another route. So maybe I'll do one around the time that Lucifer Season 5B premieres, and we'll talk about Lucifer's ring. So thank you very much. Have a good night, and keep checking out the channel for more cool stuff down the line. If you want to see some other really interesting little one-off videos and things that I've done, check out my Instagram at AJB3Art. A lot of little fun tidbits and things like that. Longer skits like the Papa skit you saw in the previous video will be here, but little tidbits and things I like to throw up on Instagram just for fun, and they don't make it to YouTube. Also, no need to go subscribe to my Twitch channel. I will be posting any Twitch video game streams I do here if I do them. And it's less about interaction, a little bit more about me, maybe as a character playing a video game. At least until the Evil Dead game drops. So thanks a lot, guys. Thanks for checking out, ring power time. And we'll check you out on the next video when I have another ring.